Hello, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. Today I'm drinking a really special tea called deconstructed tea, which is basically water. So here's a story. I love tea, and I did have a cup of tea this morning, and as I was drinking my lovely cup of Taifu breakfast tea, or whatever it's called, I suddenly had a sharp pain in my right backside, and a little bit toward the middle, nevertheless. You know, at my age, we do pull our muscles every once in a while, so that's entirely possible, but I have had some sad experience with kidney stones, TMI. So, I don't know if that's what it is, and instead of wondering and just sitting around wondering and being in pain, I thought, let's do the best thing I could do and keep drinking the water and drink the water and drink the water. So I'm going to do that today instead of having a lovely cup of tea at this point, sadly, but at least I can show you one of the teas I purchased in August, since we're talking about August. And, I think I mentioned recently that I had been running low on herbal teas, and since I really shouldn't be drinking too much black tea, it's good to have herbal tea. So I did get a bunch of new herbal teas, and I got this from Ahmad Tea, which I always used to see when I was in London in those tourist stores, the little like tchotchke stuff, and they always have this tea. I don't know why, but this is like a collection of some of their herbalist. Yeah, so I thought that looks kind of cool, and it has a lot of different types of teas, and yeah, it looks very healthy. And what with autumn coming upon us, it's good to have a lot of that. So yeah, I'll let you know how they are when I'm drinking them. So that was, good to have some teas when I'm finished drinking all the water. It's August though. Okay, September's not been so great so far, but August was a good reading month. I read about 9 books. I've mentioned a few of them already. To start, I'll come up with some of the good things. I had a post that asked you guys to help me choose a blank book / journal for September onward, and you guys were pretty unanimous. And it was the Bookstore Cats, and don't blame you guys at all. This is a great choice. I love it, and I'm very excited. I'm covering the kitties' faces. I'm very excited to use this book. I haven't started yet, so you can look inside and see the blank pages while they're still blank. Thanks, you guys, for your input. And another wonderful thing that happened. So I'm a very new booktuber. I only started in the very late spring, and I had in July my first shout out, and I very much appreciated that. And then in August I had another shout out, and that was from Katie from Books and Things, which was quite exciting because she's also one of my favorite booktubers. I mean, she's got a great channel. I probably don't need to tell you how great her channel is because you probably came from her, or at least a lot of you did, because I went overnight. Suddenly I had at least 20 more subscribers, and since then over double. So I mean, that's very much appreciated. So thank you very much, both to Katie and also to everyone that's subscribing. I appreciate you guys coming along and listening to my adventures, and I hope you enjoy. So let's talk about some of the books I read in August that I haven't talked about that much yet. I mentioned this one in my library haul. I got The Little Bookstore of Big Stone Gap by Wendy Welch, since returned to the library. Okay, so I don't know what to say about this book. Again, one of the reasons I picked it up was the vicarious interest in owning a bookshop and running a bookshop. I do read as many books as I can about that and watch as many videos about that because it's fascinating. I think most readers have a little fantasy about owning a bookshop, or at least working in one. I don't know if I ever will, for many different reasons, one of which is I can't lift things. I mean, I don't know if I pulled my back. Almost like I still kind of hope that it is, but if that were the case, that I really can't be lifting boxes. So most booksellers will tell you that you need to have that ability. So already I'm out of that. But hey, I can read about it. And at first I liked this book. Definitely didn't hate it. There were a lot of good stories. This is someone who I think it was in Virginia or West Virginia. I'm forgetting already because I finished it at the beginning of last month. Anyway, so it's a small town, where everybody kind of knows each other. So opening a bookshop as an outsider can be a little daunting. So I liked that experience, and I did like learning about all the people in the town. Well, maybe not all of them, but quite a few of them, and what people were into. So I was glad about that. I just felt, and I don't know how to say this, I don't want to be snarky because that's not like me, but I felt like the writer was a bit smug. Do you know what I mean? When you meet someone who immediately tells you that they only eat organic or that they're vegan, none of which are bad things, but it's like it's kind of unsolicited, and or that they don't watch television. That kind of person, or they make their own clothes or they make their own furniture. Well, most of these things are true for this writer, and again, not that they're all bad, but there's just this feeling of, yay, look who I am. Maybe she didn't mean it to be that way, and I don't want to be, harsh or anything, but I don't know. It just kind of put me off from completely enjoying it, because at first it was cool, and then it got a little bit much. Some people, I was reading reviews, and some people were turned off by the fact that she really does not like the book A Prayer for Owen Meany, which I thought was kind of funny that people would get angry about that. I didn't really care either way. I did like the book, but I don't care if she doesn't. I think it's good to express your opinions. But I don't know. I know that the bookshop, I think at this point, is not even in existence because of, I think they were moving on. So now it's a thing of the past, and I'm still, to me, anyone who wants to own or open a bookshop anywhere, I just applaud you. Go for it, please, if you can. If you can't, don't kill yourself. But I don't know, there was just something, just a little much. So I would say 3 stars, but maybe a little bit less. I don't know. All right, so another book that I actually liked, I still probably also a 3-star book, but I think I liked it on the whole a little bit more, was a fiction book called The Printed Letter Bookshop by Catherine Ray. And it's the main character has a good job as an associate at a law firm, but she's gunning for the partnership. And then she inherits from her estranged aunt, who has the same name as her, a bookshop and her other things. And she gets involved in this different world. They didn't live extremely far away, but it was just a completely different way of living. And obviously, things turn out pretty well, pretty much. I'm not going to give away spoilers, but it was quite predictable. The main characters, there were 3 women, because the 2 other women worked at the bookshop already, and their stories are kind of interesting. One of them sort of has a redemption story, and the other one, has some difficulty with her family relationships, and you read the ups and downs of it. 2 of the characters were first person, and the third one was a third person. And then later on in the book, they're all first person perspectives. And it was a little confusing. I know there was a point to be made about it, but I don't know. It was a little weird, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it whatsoever. Even, like I said, it was predictable, but it was a good story. And, I love reading about books, and it mentioned A Secret Garden, which I'm going to mention another time, that I want to read A Secret Garden, because don't think I ever have. Imagine. So it was a good book, quite clean. I have to say, I don't always find clean books anymore, and I prefer that, so yay. So yeah, about 3 stars. So that was a decent book to read. I finished What Matters in Jane Austen, which I mentioned in July, because it kind of carried over from Jane Austen July, although to me Jane Austen is never over. And by John Mullen, who seems quite the expert on Jane Austen. You have to really be into Jane Austen's novels to like this book, I think. Or you have to be studying it for school. But it covers all of her works, basically, and just different themes. I mentioned it already in another post, but it's good, nerdy fun, just gets into the background, and you may have read certain things and just didn't realize the import of what you were reading in a certain sentence, because you just didn't know the background. So now you will, and it's just great fun. So definitely recommend that one. I read 2 books by a writer/artist. because they're mostly like pictures with captions. So almost like a graphic novel, but it was more of a memoir. So that was Debbie Tung. I think she has a Tumblr, and if I could find it, I will put it down below. Two books called Quiet Girl in a Noisy World and also Book Love. So they're both similar in theme about an introvert who likes her alone time, who loves to read and loves tea. So very much cool. So yeah, very, very good books for, those of us who have trouble spending a lot of time with a lot of people. I have to clarify though, because I think, and I'm not sure if she did this 100%, but I think sometimes people take the word introvert and confuse it with social anxiety and other things and shyness. I've known people who are actually introverts, who are quite outgoing, who get along with a lot of people, who can stand in front of crowds, who can party, who can do all kinds of things, who live with a lot of people even. And the only difference between them and an extrovert is that they get tired a little bit quicker, need to recharge alone for a little bit. Now, that's basically what the definitions of introversion and extroversion, what they are. It's where you derive your energy, where your battery pack. So extroverts normally get energy from being with a lot of people, or being with quite a few people anyway. And introverts they recharge by being alone. Doesn't mean that you can't spend time vice versa, but it's just where you derive your energy from. So, these books sort of illustrate someone who's not just introverted, although a lot of things are relatable for any introvert. Like small talk is difficult for most introverts, etc. But I think it's someone who has a bit of social anxiety, because I found it very relatable in that sense. And that's not a bad thing, It's just I think that sometimes people mix that up a little bit. And I'm not the expert. I have read some books. We're all readers here. And yeah, I still thought they were fun to read, and I enjoyed her relationship with her. I think at the time it was her boyfriend and then husband, who is so understanding of her despite being an extrovert and is so accommodating to her needs that to me that's a love story in itself. But yeah, it goes into her life and her when she's studying in school, and then she's going at a new job and dealing with people in that sense, going to parties, all kinds of things. Just if you like that sort of thing, and of course Book Love goes more into books and loving books. It's very self-explanatory, but easy, quick reads, relatable. Loved it. So those were some of the books I read. And here's a book that I actually have in person, because again, I'm technologically impaired, and eventually I'm going to get the right programs, right situations. I have so much old stuff. My laptop is ancient. Someday I'm going to learn how to do the whole editing where you can see the picture like everybody else does. But right now you just got to listen to me talk. I'm sorry. But in the meantime, this is one book that I have in person because it was an ARC, an advanced reader copy, although it is in the shops as it appears right here. Nevertheless, Anna of Cleve, The Princess in the Portrait by Alison Weir. I've mentioned before Alison Weir that I've read quite a few of her books. Whether I agree with all of her theories or not is another story, but I tend to enjoy her arguments even when I don't agree. So she's written extensively about English history, and yeah, she's very thorough, and in recent years she's written a lot of novels, and this is part, I think, 5 of the 6 Tudor Queens, because after Anne of Cleves was Catherine Parr, and that was it. Now they call her Anna of Cleve in this book, so I guess I should start calling her Anna for now. And it does help because, there was Anne Boleyn, that gets confusing. There's 3 Catherines that were queens, so she changes the spelling in each one of them, which is, I don't know how I feel about that, but I guess it helps to differentiate. But one time I think she kept the spelling one way, and then the same paragraph there was a different one. Maybe this was an advanced reader copy after all. Otherwise, I really hope they edited that in the long run. But yeah, I have to say, excuse me, must hydrate. I must say that, Tudor stories and books have oversaturated the history market, but they're fascinating. They just are. And Anna, I guess, of Cleve is one of the more interesting to me, because a lot of them you hear about Anne Boleyn all the time and etc. But she's kind of an enigma because, I mean, not 100%, but she she was a princess in in Germany, and her brother was the Duke, or whatever you call it, of Cleve, and he was basically a Protestant. In according to this book, she wasn't. She was more, Anna was more of a Catholic, but she just doesn't really. She's just not very loud about it either way. But when Henry VIII was looking for a new wife, his man Thomas Cromwell got himself into deep troubles. I was gonna say something else, but he got himself into trouble hooking him up with Anna because he wanted to keep the Protestant League a thing. Henry VIII broke from Rome, but the thing is, he always had Catholic leanings to the end. So it was precarious for Protestants because you just never knew which way things were going to swing. So I guess a relationship with the Protestants would help Henry have that kind of support against other France and Spain, etc. But Thomas Cromwell sort of misjudged Henry VIII. He didn't realize certain things about him, which he should have realized. And anyway, there was a portrait painted of Anna so that Henry could see what she looked like. And it was quite flattering. In real life, supposedly, she wasn't that bad looking, but it was probably a little more flattering because it was front facing, which was her best side. And Henry liked the portrait, said, come on over, met her in person, didn't like her in person. And this is before that we know. This is before he knew Catherine Howard, who was his next wife, disastrous. Yeah, so it was kind of awkward, diplomatically and everything. But can you imagine being Anna and just wanting to be a good wife and a good queen, and apparently wasn't consummated, so that was awkward. But in the long run, she got out of the situation as best as possible. There was an annulment. They used the excuse that she was pre-contracted to marry someone else and that it hadn't been broken properly. Maybe. So she was wise in that she didn't really fight back, and she accepted that she was going to remain in England as the sister of Henry VIII instead of the wife, and she would have plenty of pension and lands and houses and servants and live happily ever after, which is basically what happened. But there were ups and downs because if you lived in Tudor England, nothing was perfect. There were going to be ups and downs because of the religious changes. You never knew with after Henry even, but even before. Oh my goodness, so many different troubles. You never knew which side you should be on. And then there were going to be financial difficulties because after Henry VIII died, there was a whole council of people around the young king who had their own interests and maybe didn't care about this former queen, So there were some difficulties. I think they put more drama than there might have actually been. There were certain rumors that swirled around her because of different things from her servants or whatever, but generally I think she lived one of the quieter lives, although she sort of had a more entertaining home situation than you might have expected from the beginning. But they put in a few fictionalized things that were normally would be up to speculation, but I think that just writing a straightforward story about Anna of Cleves might have just been dry, so they put a spicy bit in the story, which I'm not sure if I agree with, but I think we're just going to have to go with it and just say, hey, you never know. Very unlikely considering how sheltered she was and how dangerous it would have been to have been in this position. I'm sure you can guess what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, entertaining and possible in historical novels, because especially this particular writer does stick quite close to the timeline of history, which is important because, I'd watched some of that show, The Tudors, that came out about 10 years ago, and despite the fact that it was racy, and I am not big into that, to be honest, at all, but one of the things that was actually quite offensive to me as a history lover was the liberties they took. I mean, so many liberties with the storyline, and his sisters were mixed up with their names, who they married, etc., and many other things. Just people that these things never happened with them, And just, yeah, the way the timeline was, plus the fact that Henry VIII looked quite young and healthy, no matter what, until like maybe the last few episodes. And even then, I think, yeah, it was hard to, credit a lot of things. But I know it was a story and people didn't really care that much, except for history nerds like me. But anyway, yeah, so it was a pretty good reading month. I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed this little reading journey with me. And now September is upon us, and hopefully the difficulties that have so far presented themselves will not be present for long. I will keep drinking my water, making creepy noises with the water. And this has been Taking Tea or Water with Catherine. Adios.